Hey, good evening, guys. Kata2 Capital. This is the book club discussion session number 5 on February 7th, 2024. We're taking a close look at a section of the book dealing with the Kata2 challenge. It's only 12 pages in the book, but they are a really important set of pages. There's a tremendous number of concepts in there. Excuse me. And really, the Kata2 challenge uh, is going to be looking at one of the 5 patterns um, that are featured in the sniper. So one of the 5 patterns is the Kata2 challenge. Now, it turns out to really understand the Kata2 challenge, you have to understand the setup and the preconditions. And so we're actually going to take a look at 3 different patterns tonight because you need to see them to understand Kata2 in context. So we'll do that. I'm gonna review the pattern first because for replay value, it's probably important that you start with that and understand that particular pattern, and then go to the notes that Griff has put together for us. Now, it's appropriate that Griff did the summary on this because his introduction to our style of trading really was the Kata2 challenge. Now, Griff has a long background in trading, got a lot of experience, and he went through the Super Trader program at the Tharp Institute, and that's where he was introduced to some of my systems. He came to the what I think of as the learning laboratory and was taking a look at a number of different patterns and systems. I mean, he took a look at some things that were in the core, and then he was taking a look at some swing trade patterns, and then he was monkeying around with a couple different day trading patterns. And that's a lot to do at once. Um, and so what we decided to do was to focus on the pattern that gives the greatest immediate return, is the easiest one to align with. In other words, it has the least challenging belief systems behind it, and it gives the most frequencies of signals. And it is like my third favorite pattern. But when you add a really good pattern, number 3, multiplied by a lot of opportunities times positive expectancy, you get what's it called? Expectunity, where you get expectancy plus opportunity equals expectunity. And that's the overall intersection of quality with frequency to give you your absolute return. Okay. So we're going to take a look at that. Now, how did we get here? Well, we've been starting at the very top of the mountain, taking a look at the authors and the note-taking method and how the book is organized, uh, trading challenges, reference books, inspirations, um, specific top-level models and processes and recipes that give us the tools for success. And then last week we took a deeper dive into the world of the sniper, and now we're going even deeper in the sniper to take a look in detail at that Kata2. Okay, so that will be like a trip. At the halfway point, we will have started at the mountaintop and drilled all the way down into a hands-on tactical technique and a mindset of how to trade that at the brute force level. and that gets us about halfway through our sessions. Where we go from here in the trading tools and then these elements of mastering trading is that we leave the world of the pure technique, and then we're going to expand back towards the top, and we're going to be looking at different pathways up the mountain once again, in order to start filling in the gap. So if I were to draw this as a region, I would say, uh, uh, core, swing, and day. When we look at the Kata2 challenge specifically, we're taking a look at a really tightly focused set of rules and conditions and targets and procedures. And we will have drilled down from the very top level to get to there. When we leave here, we're going to be heading out and looking at different parts of the territory, looking at different ideas to give a broad architecture of some of the other things that we think that it takes to build out your overall meta system. So that's kind of where we are, uh, starting next week. So the next 4 weeks, we'll be looking at a wider variety of pieces and parts. Some of them may resonate with you, some not. And so you never really know until you get in. I'm finding that in the reading of the audiobook, it's a nice way to connect back with things that I think I know and I thought I knew, and looking at nuanced understanding. Then when we get to the closing sections, we'll be looking at how certain traders, 10 of them, have put together all of those pieces from 1 through 12 to craft their own particular style of tortoise trading. And then the last two sessions, 11 and 12, we'll be taking a look at answering your specific questions as as you leave the perimeter, as you start, working on your own stuff. What else can we answer specifically for you now that you've had a chance to, see all the material at the top level? And then these last two are a chance for you um, to adjust the fit of the material to you. So that's kind of where we're heading. Um, hmm. Right. So this is a flashcard that I use in the foundations course to describe what I think are the central three linked patterns that I consider to be the essence of the sniper. And I'm going to talk a lot about Kata 2. I'm just going to talk about the supported spring crossing and the collapsing dragon because that's what happens when one of these other ones is successful or fails. So, like if the supported spring crossing works, then what you have is a market condition where there was a harsh winter, meaning that there was an abnormally large, rapid sell off from some price level. And this sell off to this price level in a certain amount of time is indisputably abnormally large and fast. And if we were looking at the MACD setup on the as an indicator, we would see that it is in the winter condition and that this thing has moved a statistically significant distance. What we say is that the harsh winter creates the conditions for this symbol to be in play in the current market, meaning that there's more than just normal noise and repositioning going on. There is some really active selling that has dominated the buying, and it results in a massive sell off. So we have these certain rules and patterns and checkpoints along the way that walk us through a successful supported spring crossing. Briefly, there was a harsh winter as measured by the RL10 regression line. It gets to a low, it reverses, it crosses the baby dragon, which is the 3-period SMA of the RL10. The MACD histogram turns from winter to spring. It crosses through the dragon and goes over the dragon. That's the RLXD. And now somewhere in here, it'll turn to spring. Sometimes price will move a little faster than it changes, so that can vary. But then price will cross the PSAR. In this case, it crosses right here. So there's our descending PSAR, which uses the RL10 as the data for price, not the price. It uses the RL10. And then we get an entry signal, and then we see the PSAR has flipped from here, and now it's going to start marching up. So the distance from our entry down to where the PSAR flipped, which is also where the RL10 reversed, that establishes our risk box. And this trade is qualified because given the size of the harsh winter and the distance it traveled, you are 99 times out of 100 going to be able to see at least a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1, better, return to some price level that we mark off as a reasonable target. It could have been a return to the price level where it opened, or where this was a sideways quiet channel, or it was a previous peak of the RL10 and then reversed. So we pick some reasonable upside target, usually where this trade began, to establish our upper limit for a reasonable target. So that if we get all of these criteria and we get the 2 or 3-to-1, depending on your demands, we get the entry, and then our job is to get the initial stop established at the belly of the RL10, which is co-located with the first PSAR dot after it flips. And then our job is to get that stop to no lose plus dinner for 2. That's our first decision point. At 2R, we're thinking about how to activate the sniper exit strategy, because we have an abnormally large win. And we're also thinking somewhere around here at either 2 or 3R, trying to figure out where we're going to put a second position in. So that's what happens when the SSC conditions are in place and you get an entry and you get a successful trade, meaning that you exited this trade because the RL10 rolled over, and then based on your exit strategy, you're able to cash a winning trade. That's good. That is the precondition for the Kata2, that we have a successful supported spring crossing, meaning that all of these other criteria had to be in place and there was that much follow through that gives us the basis for the Kata2. You could think of the Kata2 as a continuation trade on the SSC. It's not the only time, but that's most of the time, that's what you could see it as. Now, in our view, it does not require you to have actually taken this trade in order to take the Kata2. All you have to do is see that all the conditions were in place, and that if you had taken the indicated supported spring crossing, that you got a winning trade, and now the conditions for the Kata2 were in play. Now, if the supported spring crossing does not work, and instead of going up, it actually rolls over and falls through your initial stop, then that triggers a stop and reverse, or at least a reverse if you might have exited in here because of your own rules. But when it price violates the collapsing dragon, you have the signal to enter a collapsing dragon, which is a short side trade, which uses the same size risk box. And because the previous harsh winter was abnormally large, what you have is this kind of condition: SSC that fails, and then a collapsing dragon. And we think of this first move as leg one, and we expect leg two to be at least as big as leg one. So we know that it's qualified at either 2 or 3-1. So that's what you get if the SSC fails. In fact, that's also what you get if the SSC started to form, but it never gave you an entry, but it failed before it even got there and then continued to the downside. That's an immediate trigger for the collapsing dragon. It turns out that the collapsing dragon is my number one favorite tactical pattern on any time frame because of both the expectancy, the frequency, and the speed with which the winning trades win. My second favorite pattern is the supported spring crossing because it sets up the resolution of the SSC is either going to give you Kata2s if it's successful, or it's going to lead you to collapsing dragons if it fails. So this thing almost never goes sideways. It almost always, 95% of the time, is going to give you a sharp move in one direction or the other. And because sometimes you get a breakout to the upside, which then fails into a CD, or a CD which fails into another SSC, this leads into what we think of as chain trading, where you're starting to string together a series of trades based on the logical outcomes. So taken together, these things are linked, and that's why we think of it as chain trading. What we like to do is teach and practice the Kata2 first, because that's the least challenging to our typical beliefs. So what that means is that we have when we look at the Kata2, now we'll come into this one, we had the SSC, a harsh winter, reverses, SSC entry, and up it goes. And then maybe this is where we make an exit according to whatever exit strategy we might employ. But we've cashed a winning trade. Now, typically, what we call the dragon, I talked about that last week, which is the 10-period Bollinger Band plus or minus 0.5, has reversed and is following price up. And now we've successfully exited. And typically that price will fall through the dragon, which then, because of the sell-off, goes from up to rolling over or flat, or maybe even starting to roll over. And then instead of failing all the way back to our initial stop, where we would see a collapsing dragon, instead it finds support, and the sooner the better. It finds support in here, and the RL10 and the price pass through the dragon, and now in this region, on the other side of the dragon, we have the Kata2 entry and the risk box is drawn to the bottom of the RL10 where it peaked on the bottom, the inverse peak. Wherever that peaked, our risk box is from the entry down to that level, and that becomes our R. Now, this is normally entering before price has moved above the previous peak of the RL10. So we call this little space in here the no man's land or the yellow zone or the pocket. So the pocket entry gets us in with a mathematically defined risk because any violation below that stop level can actually be taken as another collapsing dragon. And if this fails right away, the more we like that entry, then with a second position, if it comes all the way down and violates the first stop. That's how you start getting these daisy chains of trades towards our number one favorite pattern, which is the collapsing dragon. Now, if that price is able to get through the previous peak of the RL10, then we have evidence that new buyers are coming in to hit the asking price at a price higher than it was over here. So this is new buying pressure, and that gives us a belief that this thing could work. And that's what constitutes a successful Kata2. So the Kata2, our exit management strategy is simply how soon can I get my stop above my Kata2 entry so that I can lock in no lose plus dinner for two, meaning as soon as I can net $100 on this trade, that becomes the worst possible outcome. That's a very positive psychological state as I manage this trade. And then we teach a number of different strategies about how to manage that rising stop, either with a trailing stop as a function of money management, as a function of how far it goes, as a function of a chandelier stop from the highest high. We can hang a trailing stop off the highest high. And we teach a number of different ways that we can get out of that trade. Now, the reason we like the Kata2 because of the frequency is that after you've had the harsh winter that reverses and you have a successful SSC that exited, and then you had price reverse, cross through the dragon, and now you hit your entry on the far side of the dragon, and that thing starts going. It turns out that you could have 5 to 6 Kata2 buy on dip all the way up to whatever the previous satisfying price target could be. So you might have seen price start up here, a harsh winter at SSC, and then a series of Kata2 trades with you being able to buy on dips all the way up. So it's not unusual to see lots of Kata2 trades. And the only thing we need to see are that the belly of the RL10, which comes to a sharp point, as we talked about last week, as long as we continue to see higher lows, then the buying impulse that's coming from all of these guys wanting to buy on dips, the buying pressure is continuing because they start coming in and buying it at a higher price than they did the previous cycle. What it takes to break that chain is price that instead of going up, comes down and then makes a reversal here. And now what I have is uh, a lower low as measured by the pointy end of the RL10. So if I have this and then this, I am usually going to see a lower high as well. And now what we have is a peak at 1, a new lower low at 2, a lower high at 3, and now I'm set up for a channel that's going to lead to Kata2s on the downside. And it's the same rules in reverse. And those are typically the best trades that we see because those are really a series of collapsing dragons. Now, that's everything that I'm going to say about that pattern tonight. There's enough information in that presentation that you can trade that set. So what we've done is in the Kata2 challenge, when I was working with Griff, in order to focus him on that, we wrote up the Kata2 challenge with a set of rules that were very specific, and then some very specific things on how to assess and study, which then led Griff to about a 9-month process of daily live trading, focusing on two symbols, EWZ Brazil and DIA, the Dow Jones 30 Industrials, on 3-minute charts. And every night he posted his trade case studies, one for DIA and one for EWZ, into the nightly chat room every night. And what he did was add his markups, his lessons learned from his after action review also went onto those. So he was looking through a coach's eye at his own trading, and then he would compare what I would say about those two marked up charts every night. He would compare what I said to what he saw, and in that way he was learning to develop what we call the coaching eye, and he became much more effective in evaluating his own trading and evaluating the trading of others. And after 9 months, his positive expectancy was good enough that we turned that into a system with rules plus tips of insights, and then we made that a teachable course. And because of his experience of 9 months of coaching with me, I supervised his coaching of others for about 3 months. I approved the course that he and Phil put together, and now that leads us into a 2-part course, the Kata2 Challenge course, in which you retrace his footsteps in building out the system that works by understanding all of the rules and the tips. And that includes a lot of this material, but also his personalization of it. And you learn the procedure, which we call the Applied System Development course. You get those two courses in the Ableway Tech courses because we want you to experience a really good rule set, which is what this is, the system, rules, tips, and as taught by the guy who wrote it and having his coaching, plus the procedure that he followed to turn my initial guidance and my coaching into the system. The Applied System Development course teaches you how to adapt an existing set of rules and refine it to where you're satisfied with it based on the data and the analysis of the results. So what can you use that for? You can use that to actually look at your existing rules and make them better. You can make your own rule set better. Or you can take somebody else's rule set and use this recipe to turn that rule set into yours. And this also is the basis for continuous improvement. So we think that's a really important process. And that's essentially what the Foundations book is really all about, is because we have a community of practice with a lot of different systems that are variations of mine and other traders' work, one of which is the Kata2 rule set. And then the Applied System Development course allows you to take any of those that are starting to resonate with you and move it into your zone of competency. We want to take that basic rule set and bring it into your responsibility and teach you how to adjust it for fit and function so that you can adapt it to your own use. That's what the Foundations book is about. It's not a get rich quick scheme or uh, fast track to infinite. Well, no, no, it is a professional process of taking good, proven tools and teaching you the craft knowledge on how to use those tools and how to improve the tools, and in the future, how to make your own tools. So that's what I want to say by way of introduction. Now, I can already hear somebody asking the question, well, what else? Well, this was from early in the COVID era, and this was at the time of the writing of the Kata2 challenge. We said, look, kata is an important concept for how to practice properly with structured drills that have been reduced to the essential elements. And so, one of the things that we like to do is say, if we understand the conditions of the SSC, to recognize that first so that you can use the Kata2 as the continuation pattern, which can lead to a couple other strategies as you go up the chain of success, or it leads to the collapsing dragon going down the chain uh, of reinforcing short side. And kata means that you understand the pattern, how to prepare for it, how to find signals and candidates for your plan to trade it, and then how to master your own psychology in the performance of that. And then once you've traded it, learn how to assess it, learn how to incorporate that data into your learning, and then manage your learning and manage your trading through a process of continuous improvement, which we model after Japanese manufacturing, such as the Shingo, that pretty bad handwriting, the Shingo process for improving industrial manufacturing, the Kaizen philosophy of incremental continuous improvement, and the concept of Gemba, which is Japanese for the workshop itself, place where work is done. And it turns out that this entire process of kata, through the psychological and practical prep, through the learning environment, through the discipline management approach, really is universally applicable to people who just want to do core trading, long term weekly swings or monthly adjustments, or who want to do swing trading, holding positions 2 to 10 days, or who want to be day traders, or people who want to be hybrid traders that mix and match and integrate two or more of those pieces into an overall system. It turns out that this process of developing craft knowledge and continuous improvement works in all of the time dimensions in which we trade. And so the sequence of which patterns to learn first starts with a deep understanding of the importance of the supported spring crossing conditions, and then the supported fall crossing and winter crossing is really how you get into the Kata twos. And then uh, the owl and the emerging dragon are later entries for people who are not used to maybe the rapid entries of Kata 2. And it also leads to the collapsing dragon. Now, when these directional moves that initiate from a supported spring crossing have run their course and all of the passion is gone, these will typically compress at a new price level that everybody is satisfied with. And the Bollinger Band limits will compress into a really tight wrist box. So we have a measurement that we use to determine when it has compressed to an abnormally large or abnormally small state. And when it does, now we're ready to start trading breakouts from abnormal compression. We don't trade the sideways quiet channel. We wait until the Z3 Bollinger Bands have pinched. And if the regression lines come into that pinch, we get a super pinch. So those are the two ways in which we trade these tightly compressed regions that typically occur after an extraordinary move out of the supported spring crossing. That's a discussion for a later date, and that's also part of um, sniper trading and the other things that we teach. But I wanted to set the conditions for you to appreciate what the Kata2 is really about. Now, one of the things that we study is how proficient am I with my kata. So for every concept that we teach, there's a trail of tears as you increase your skill. At first, I didn't even know that that was a thing. And then I heard the title, but I'm not sure about the concept. So I moved up to here. And then I'm familiar with the concept and maybe how it works. And then, all importantly, I've locked it in. I can use it and I am using it in my trading. That's an important one. That's when you have ownership and it's in production. This is when you're trying it on for size. And the next level up is when you get to the level where you could teach it, you have now internalized it not only from your point of view, but from the point of view of others, and you can explain it in multiple ways so that others can start following in your path. And then finally, you get to the point where, as a true believer, based on evidence, that you become an advocate for others to use it, and you look for ways that you can help other people using that tool. When you could teach it sometimes just means if somebody asks you, you could teach it. But when you get to the level of true believer based on evidence, an advocate, a proponent, you're looking for ways to help other people actively. So as we think of all of our craft knowledge concepts, we really think of it in terms of kata and kata proficiency, and self-assessment is the process by which you judge where you are in how you are doing with the concept. What are you doing with the concept? Like if you can talk about it but you're not using it, you can't be any higher than familiar. And if you can talk about it but you haven't used it, you still don't know until you've actually put it into practice under risk controlled measures. That's how you get familiar, through use. This is knowledge in use. That's how you get familiar. And then when you've reduced errors and improved proficiency, you've greased the groove, you've locked it in. Now you're using it as part of your production. And then you could teach it to others, meaning that you can see through their eyes and explain it in words or symbols or demonstrations that they can get. So if you think about Griff, when he first came to us from the Super Trader program for his next level of development, he didn't know those things yet. And he has gone all the way through these 7 levels of punishment to the point where he is finding ways in which to solve other people's problems through effectively teaching what he is using that's based on our collective body of knowledge. So this kata proficiency has been the learning guide for Griff and Phil and all my other students all the way through their movement towards proficiency. And when you follow this path, you not only are self-assessing, that you are self-directing, that you are that you have what is called by psychologists agency, that you are empowered to plan, prepare, execute, and assess on your own. You're a black belt in acquiring this knowledge, meaning that you can now take on the supervision of your own trading. Now, coaching is always helpful, accountability partners expedite the process, but our goal is to become self directed and independent, autonomous individuals. That's where true robustness comes from. And that's what every teacher wants, is a student that can do that. When we look at book number 3, the job book, we've identified 75 concepts. The first one I like to teach in this way is Kata2. The 2R battle drill is one of those 75. Plan, prepare, execute, assess, process is one of those 75 skills. Book number 3 is going to lay out a definition of all of those and how to acquire them, and also give you the glossary plus examples of how that works. And that's going to be a home study course as well for folks that want to take the deliberate path. The foundations course teaches all of those. Um, and you have lifetime access to the foundations course. But book number 3 in a workbook form is going to give a little more clarity and structure to this whole process. So you can look forward to that before June, or I'm going to die trying. Let's not go there. All right. I've now given you a 45-minute introduction to the essence of these 12 pages. And he's done a magnificent job of clarity in this. Keywords, the battle drill is strongly connected to kata because kata is a drill that's used in battle, and it aligns very strongly with the U.S. Army's training methods of developing battle drills so that we have instantaneous, well-trained, effective responses to environmental triggers. React to contact, react to ambush, react to sniper, react to indirect fire, react to danger in a crossing area. All of those things are battle drills that individuals, teams, squads, and platoons, up to 50 guys, can instantly put into action with a few code words and triggers. And that instantaneous, overtrained action in all kinds of environmental conditions is what leads to our success. So battle drill and its connection to kata is defined here. Fear of missing out is the most challenging aspect of a trained, educated trader who has not yet internalized everything. That when you see harsh winter happening and it's starting to turn, but it hasn't hit your entry trigger yet, the urge to front run that is extraordinary. But you're in the most dangerous area because if that fails, it's going to go right into the trade you want, which is the collapsing dragon. Similarly, what we have to do with the Kata2 is we have to see the SSC work. And then and only then do we look for the reversal with support at a higher level that constitutes the Kata2 pattern. So fear of missing out is one of the big challenges of patiently waiting for the Kata2 entry. And that's discussed in page 170. Stick time comes from the world of pilot training, in which there's no substitute for hands-on flying of the airplane to teach you how to fly the airplane. And so our belief is that it's important to get practice first in paper trading and then trading live with one share so that you can see if there's any difference between how you trade on paper and how you trade live with one share. Plus, the live share trading is low cost and it's your best method of forward testing ever because it's actual trading. We like to say the best model of a cat is another cat, preferably the same cat. So we think the best trade simulator is the actual market and your broker trading one share live. And if you made 50 trades risking $1 or one share or whatever, and if you lost them all, if you lost $50 plus the cost of commission, so for about $100 maximum, you would know everything that you really need to know about that system and how it fits or doesn't fit you and what needs to be adjusted on it, more so than an infinite amount of back testing, in my opinion. Now, what we do in the Kata2 challenge course is the use of sample sets so that you can compare your performance against a known data set to investigate your ability to execute the rules error free. And that's a way to demonstrate both understanding of the patterns and the ability to apply them, either one of which is a source of possible errors. So we talk about that as a training tool in page 168. These talk about how Griff got started. We talk about why we made choices to simplify down to just two symbols, EWZ as a volatile large cap index from an used to be an emerging market that is semi-correlated to the S&P, and DIA, a conservative large cap US ETF. And then we pick 3 minutes because you get a lot of stick time per day, and K2 because it was central to the sniper. We talk about knowing the problem and why the Kata2 as a system solves typical trading problems. We talk about the psychology of learning a new system and how the Kata2 discipline addresses self-sabotage and just fiddling around. We talk about how the sample sets help us in training and how we can psychologically dissolve fear of missing out, and why the concept of the 2R battle drill is the key to future series of Kata2s once that Kata2 is successful. And we think that one's so important that we want you to listen to the trading video every day for 30 days. It takes 11 minutes. In terms of self, there's a lot of psychological elements associated with the Kata2 challenge. It helps you learn to develop patience, risk control, discipline, and mindset. And what makes trading as a system different than other things that it is similar to. So if you took a look at trading and flying, you would notice if this is trading and that's flying, there's a lot of things where they have items in common, but it's the area that is different about trading and different about flying that is the source of misunderstanding. So when you choose a trading metaphor, whether it's art or woodwork or sport, or like I use combat, or like Jeff Southern uses as flying, the metaphor has a certain amount of utility where the greater the similarity, the easier it is to use your strength to apply to trading, but it's really important to understand that boundary where trading is unique. And in this section of the book, we talk about how trading is different from other elements. And then we talk about the Kata challenge and in summary, how it works in terms of system management. We talk about the relationship of Kata2 to the overall markets and how that particular tool is well suited for markets of a certain type. In Griff's synchronization, he talks about his integration, that the most important part of the Kata challenge method is learning how to stick to one thing when there are other shiny objects kicking around that are distracting you. And that's where you start building up the discipline to do one thing well. And secondarily, that the concepts in your head don't matter until you get into the work of your hands. So if we think about our walking man model that we briefed a long time ago, we talk about the knowledge of the head and the knowledge of the heart for our conceptual knowledge and our identity knowledge, and the knowledge of the gut, which is fear. The Kata 2 challenge is now moving us into the knowledge of the hands, where we are looking to perform perfect practice and learning the skills consciously. When we can string together a lot of those, we then move into knowledge of the feet, which is how we do that over lots of repetitions. So this little model teaches us how we move out of our hand through our identity, leveraging and employing our fear to give us the energy to do the right thing, and then learning the skill with our hands through repetition in the kata, and then through increased repetition and to gain the numbers that we need to perform data analysis. So, in a nutshell, uh, only 12 pages in this book. Extremely important because it is at the centerpiece. This is where all of the strategies and systems and operations and the tactics come down to one pattern. And the skills that you learn in mastering that pattern are going to lead you to success in all of the other patterns and processes that you intend to learn. So, this is where you learn how to learn with craft knowledge. A good motivational book for that is Edward Slingerland's Trying Not to Try, which is an examination of Chinese philosophy of the last 3,000 years, which is how you solve the paradox or learn to live with it of trying hard to learn some things that require you to be relaxed. How do I aggressively and intentionally and directly work hard at relaxing, which is what is necessary in trading in the moment? So this is really well discussed in his book, and it is essentially the central idea of the Chinese concept of yin yang, which tries to incorporate both of those elements inside an integrated person who is both thinking and reflecting, who is doing and resting, who is in motion and who is still, and is doing all of that in some fashion simultaneously. So, this is a really important contribution to the so what of the well known yin yang symbol. Once you see the yin yang, what do I do? What are those next steps? This process of developing craft knowledge is an implementation of a lot of those ideas that can be found in Trying Not to Try. So that's everything that I want to say for tonight and put a lid on it. And I'm open. We have about 5 or 10 more minutes before we have to get ready for the nightly podcast, but I'm open to any additional questions either in chat or you can come online here for the with your microphone if it's easier to just talk it. Yeah, Griff, that wasn't bad. That was about 35 years of action, and it wasn't effortless action, but that's about 35 years of suffering. Yeah, Rick asks, what are the most common mistakes when executing the Kata2? Griff, I'm going to hit a couple of them, but this is also one that I think would be of use to you. For me, the biggest one is learning to trust the system to behave as a system. What we got to remember is that systems in that are in a chaotic market really, operate within that's the pure path. But there is some normal amount of deviation in the rules that are expected under a system that's working inside an ecosystem, right? So you have a process that's supposed to do that. That maybe that's the back tested expectancy and maybe the historical expectancy. But in certain regions of that performance, you get variation. And our perfectionist bias makes us want to start trying to explain the reasons behind each and every little piece of variation. And that leads to tinkering and tweaking on a data set of one. So I would just say, um, I think it's really fear, uncertainty, and doubt. The famous FUD of Microsoft fame. And part of the things that you have to learn as an engineer is that a system that's under control stays within its control limits, but is going to experience variation in between there as a part of the normal uh, influence of things in the external ecosystem beyond our control, which are coming in and hitting us at different times and different forces. If you've built a good system, it has seen a lot of that behavior and has built in control limits that allow us to operate in this safely controlled space. That's what your filters and criteria are. So, in my view, the single biggest challenge to the Kata 2 is an underappreciation of what variation in chaotic markets does and why it triggers the emotional brain to start tweaking when we don't have enough data yet that says the system is out of control. So it's really pretty easy to learn the patterns and see them, but it's really quieting the doubt and managing the internal monkey. And then there's a certain amount of hands-on skill that it takes to really internalize the patterns. And that's what you get when you're working on the training data sets and all that, and just learning to make sure that you're interpreting the rules correctly, um, and learning how to estimate 2 to 1 and some of those things. So there's just sort of, it's like hammering a nail. It's not really that hard, but until you hammered 100 nails error free, there's still a good chance you're going to hit your thumb, and be reminded that simple doesn't necessarily mean easy. So that's what I would say is the most common mistakes associated with Kata 2. Yeah. And and that is connected to Griff's comment in the book of learn he had to learn that the one trade that he was briefing me that night was really just trade number one of the next 1,000. And that the rules that we had were geared in order to be successful on 1,000 trades, and that you're going to get some variation, and don't use one data point to change rules that are coming from, thousands of case studies. So there's a certain amount of patience and suffering that you have to go through. And so one of the things that we believe strongly in is this idea of developing the coach's eye. That if you can make a certain trade, you're really focusing just on what you're supposed to look at. When you pull that up at the end of the day, you end up noticing that there were other things going on that were outside of your vision. You couldn't even see them because you were concentrating on the trade itself. So learning how the trade performed in the presence of some of these other variables is part of the assessment phase. Now, you're not doing that when you are living the trade because you're trying to concentrate on error-free performance of the rules. So you're working on that. It's not until you get into the assessment that you can stand off a little bit, move to a different position. The trader was right here, and now I got to learn to be over here as a coach and see what else was going on. Now, the more that you do that, the more you learn to see the other things that are going on and understand where rules might need to be adjusted or other opportunities for trading systems beyond the limits of Kata2. But what it also does is gives you the ability to adopt a different point of view as a coach. And when you are experiencing emotional distress as a trader, fear of missing out or anxiety or whatever, you can learn to step outside of your trade once it's in place and your stops are, and now you can go adopt a coaching mentality so that you can learn to resist the urge to tinker. This is a byproduct of learning to be a good accountability partner. If you can learn to adopt the coach's eye, as I described earlier tonight, then you can acquire the skills to give you resilience when you are experiencing anxiety as a trader. You just adopt the coach's eye and say, look, is my stop in the right place? Am I trading at the right level of risk that's appropriate? Then that fear is, we learn then to simply treat fear as an anxiety response, which is the body generating energy. And then we, instead of worrying about it and changing the rules, we turn that into implement your checklist, do the right thing. And then we notice that the anxiety and fear dissipates in about 1 to 3 minutes. And now you have a piece of evidence that you can successfully convert fear and anxiety into proper professional behavior. And then that quiets the fear and anxiety a little bit. You still feel them, but the energy is more regulated. And you realize that you can put that energy into action or into storage in a battery to give you the energy to do the right thing later when you don't feel like doing the assessment. You say, look, I went through all the trouble of managing fear and anxiety and generated all this energy. I'm not going to take a shortcut on my assessment when I was able to deal with the existential threat. That generated energy, and now I'm going to use that to continue to be professional and take one more professional step. That is an essential element of developing a professional state of mind. A professional trading practice is knowing what to do when the fear and the anxiety come, because they will, because that's what happens. You can't stop it or control it, but you can recognize it, and then you can direct the energy into positive affirmative behavior. We also teach that in the foundations course. But that is a central feature of the nightly podcast and the nightly coaching. Griff, anything, if you're on, anything else to add to that?
No, nothing I can think of. You pretty much covered everything. I think. Yeah, I mean the fiddling around would be the biggest mistake. I think it's yeah. I mean you basically show the patterns. It doesn't take long to learn the patterns. It's really the discipline of. I guess people. I know I did. I underestimated how hard it is to trade to do 20 or 30 trades and not change rules. And I think people underestimate and all the psychological baggage that will come up when you decide to do that, that's going to try to get you to change it. And but by completing those sample sets is the only way I think that we can really. It's all from Mark Douglas. It's that idea of learning to think in
Yep.
probabilities. It's totally different
Yep.
than just
Yes.
thinking about it. And I can tell when people ask me questions already if they can or not, because it's like, are they trying to engineer and optimize every exit? You don't need to do that if your probabilities are good. But
Yep.
it's so easy to get into that to want to, over optimize and
Yeah,
that.
one of the benefits of that, one of the byproducts is that when you learn that the results are the responsibility of the rules, and you are not the rules. You are the intention and the scientist and the observer and the analyst. When you can take yourself out of the rules, you can let the rules just be what they're supposed to be and trade them as error free as you can so that you can see what the results are that the rules get. And you realize that that's not a reflection of your self-worth or your identity or all that other stuff. It's simply the results are a statement about what the rules get in the market that we just had. And then you can make decisions on when to use the rules, how to use the rules, what position size to use the rules, what markets, what time frames, how often. And then once you understand process control, do I have enough information from the results to suggest that how to improve the rules? And that's well known. I got to have minimum 30, but I'd rather have 100 data points in order to begin looking for the single best change I can make to the rule and then investigate that to see if that's actually an improvement of the rule. So all of that, in my view, is really crucial. The idea of the coaching mind is really the best way that I know to get yourself out of the rule space where the trader wants to live. You got to learn to be able to separate the trader from the rules. The trader's operating the rules. The coach is standing outside of all that and is observing. So when you spend time learning how to do this, you can then actually do that for yourself and do it for others. And that's why the value of the nightly podcasts to me and the working with an accountability partner gives you a fresh set of eyes. Because if the elephant is in the middle of the circle and you got an accountability group and this guy is the trader, now you got 5 or 6 different points of view about how he's performing the trade. And now this guy can benefit from all of the multiple insights from his accountability partners. And that's what leads us to the community of practice. And why it's important that that community of practice has standards and procedures and definitions so that we can work together efficiently and effectively to create that learning community. All right. I don't see any other questions, so we're going to roll it up here so we can get ready for the nightly podcast at 8:30. Thank you guys very much, and look forward to next week's uh, discussion. This one is absolutely crucial. It's the halfway point of understanding the tactics of learning and the learning of tactics with a single pattern in a proper way that leads to all future success. You got to get this one right. And if you don't, you get to come back and do it again, essentially, until you do. I mean, really, that's the only way I know to get through this. Whether we're talking soccer, martial arts, combat, trading, leading, team building, um, it all kind of comes back to this one. All right, take good care, guys, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.